Hello, I'd like to welcome you to Ideas with Diana. Hello, I'd like to welcome you to Ideas with Diana on this December 23rd, 2022. Today in Wisconsin, we see in Wisconsin we're going through whether we normally go through from mid-January to mid-February. The wind chill is 35 below today, which in Celsius, let's see, will come out to about 40 or 50 below, I think, in Celsius. And and also, it's interesting is some people are still getting out doing things. When I look at the post office across the street, but this is the day that many of us remember, especially those who had big engine cars in the 70s and 80s. When I had my Mercury Grand Marquis with the 460 cubic inch engine, which is a translated to about eight plus liter engine, and we had 40 weight oil, and you went to start going, and if you didn't have a jumper, you couldn't start it. But if you did, then it went, as soon as the oil warmed up, but you heard this bubble bubble. And what happened was, that was our Winter Olympics. That was our Winter Olympics was the jump start contest when you had to start your car on days like this where you were required to work. Because when I worked as a medical researcher, we were considered a hospital. So, like the post office, rain, snow, severely cold weather, you got there. You got there any way you could, like that. And some days, what I do if I knew the storm was coming ahead of time, I actually would stay at the Holiday Inn, which was next door to the research park. In those days, it's $20 for a hotel room, and Holiday Inn was right across from Mayfair Mall. And so I go at lunch, get the hotel room, pay for in cash. Back then, I didn't use a credit card, even though I had a gold card. Um, and go over to the restaurant, walk over to Mayfair Mall for a little bit, and then in the morning I get back, and I would say, well, God, how'd you get back so fast? And also in those days, when I did drive, I always carried a $50 deductible because I'm such a good driver and such a safe driver. Now the thing is, what today's show is about, it says, "Long live the kings, a new hegemony paradigm." Well, at least I say that it reminds me of, people think that basically, a king or paradigm lasts forever. So let's go into the main segment. I'll show you what I mean. Now, when you look at this main segment, you're going to see different advertisements, in that though. One advertisement is shows the Osborne One, which was basically the computer I used all the way from 1983 actually up to 1994 when I worked as a medical researcher, carrying. And I as 25 pounds, no battery, but it actually had a carvo battery connection in there, so you could actually use the same type of battery connection used for your car to connect into the Osborne One, to run it on a 12-volt DC battery. And I carried this thing down Wisconsin Avenue from 7th Street in Wisconsin to 17th Street. And even when I drove out to the Research Park, and a colleague of mine, Tom, um, I just could say, Tom K. He actually had a compact, so both of us were the sort of the cool researchers, hippie researchers who had the first portables. Some people say luggables, but it's interesting how much we could get done without having to go through the bureaucracy and the hegemony of then the IBM world, IBM mainframe world, and also as to the MS-DOS world, who is trying to who sometimes we wondered if they played fair among the CPM group. The other thing you see is basically is the DR-DOS. Um, Now that's digital research DOS, and many people when we did switch over to basically 8086 machines, as I'll call it. I'm not going to call it MS DOS. As we switched over from Z80 machines, which is Osborne 1, to 8086 machines, we had the option of using the DOS they supplied from Redmond, However, many of us rejected it and decided to support digital research, like we did support digital research on the Z80 machines, and we went to digital research DOS. The advantage of digital research DOS, which many people may not realize today, was digital research DOS machines were unhackable. Because what happens, the common way people used to hack basically the MS-DOS machines was they get a formatted floppy disk and you put it in the disk drive and you could bypass any security because it would read the operating system and basically boot up. Now, DRDOS, the DRDOS drives were encrypted, so if someone tried to boot up with operating system, the computer wouldn't boot up because basically it actually checked the encryption on the disk, and if the disk didn't match the equipment, it wouldn't even load the operating system. So you couldn't even do it through the old floppy disk hack. And it works. So basically, between work, when I worked back then in the medical research, Tom had the Compact, I had the Osborne one, and at work we had Windows 3.1, and the thing was basically was well trying to get things done on Windows 3.1 and also in medical research because we do a lot of graphics, we do a lot of analysis, histograms, and charts. Um, the one thing that made it interesting was we also had in my lab I had an HP 9000, which was the first of the new computers that were used for seaboard computing in the new Navy, and it had an S100 bus, so thumb screws, you pull it out. It's almost like putting a pizza in the oven. You put it in, slide it in, turn the screws, put it on, boom, just like the Osborne one. And so when we ran that, what happened was basically that had the IEEE 488 bus like the Osborne one, and also one thing when it was wise with my predecessor in the lab, he started to experiment. He actually bought an IEEE breakout board for the Windows 3.1 machine lab that was in my lab on the desk. And the reason why I mentioned this is because at that time when we needed to transport data back and forth, um, the Osborne couldn't talk to the IBM mainframe. Osborne couldn't talk to the Windows machine. The HP couldn't talk to the IBM mainframe. The HP couldn't talk to the Windows machine. No one could talk with everybody. So a very dysfunctional computer family. Almost reminds you of Thanksgiving, like that though. Well, all year round like that though. So very dysfunctional computer family. So what we had to do was basically we had to take these expensive floppy disks. I use this as an example of a floppy disk holder. Take these expensive floppy disks, and it was my job to basically drive from at one point the research park up in Wauwatosa all the way down back to the original lab site on 17th, Wisconsin. It was a fun drive. Actually, I could drive it asleep like that, though. Sometimes a friend of mine, Karen, she sometimes wondered if I was sleepwalking because of the hours we had to keep, especially during Fun Month, which was July and October. So I drive my Mercury and go, no. At that time, when the Wisconsin Avenue Viaduct was under construction, so I took State Street, drove past Miller, and then turned on to Wisconsin about 35th Street and drove to 17th and walked these big bunches of discs and handed it over to the researcher. What happened was, it was a nice breakout. But the thing is, to me, it's like, well, God, it's a big waste of time if we have to do this every day like this and stuff. So I thought, well, why can't we figure out a way to end this dysfunctional family? Let's start getting the people to talk. So what happened was basically I started looking at this IEEE thing. I thought, well, wait, the Osborne's IEEE is the same as the IEEE breakout box of the HP and in the Windows, and then I started reading the manual. And Karen was sort of like Karen was a great friend. At that time, we couldn't date because basically due to military rules, and especially during the first Gulf War, someone imposed military rules that we couldn't. So we stayed good friends for even to this day. And Karen was my right hand in the lab. And I remember when I was working, at one point Karen came on and says, "You better put that book down. The Bobbsey twins are coming your way." And I didn't at that time. I didn't understand what the Bobbsey twins meant, but I understood the connotation. Those were the two IT guys, and they were very much true blue IBMers and MS-DOS people. It's like, well, what are you doing reading the HP book? You don't need to know anything about the HP. You don't need to know anything about how to do this. All you have to do is just run the programs that we have installed, and we'll take care of everything else. You have nothing to worry about. The type of mansplaining that many men do to women too. I'm trying to control them and manipulate them. And like I did, at that time I hadn't transitioned, but what I did, I said, yes, okay, fine, fine. Yeah, just do it. I have to do some update and some calibration work. So if you could, I'll talk with you another time. And then they, with that, at our second attempt, left the lab. So I continued, and finally I figured out a way how to wire it up. And it's similar to like what happens like with this, like with the Arduino. You wire things up and you get it done. And so what happened when I wired this up, I wired this up in this thing, and what the other thing what I did is so I went downtown and I talked to one of the researchers downtown, and actually and one executive. I said, look, can I do an experiment? Can I just hook it up so that I can transmit data over the network over to your PC? And I really don't want the Bobbsey twins to be on this. He says, I checked with the military contract. The people who are under military contract think this is a great idea and they support it. I said, sure, go ahead. So what happens? I set it up, and I had one person at the other end. We were on the phone, and I sent the data across. And I was able to send it 12 miles away from Wauwatosa to the old research lab on 17th, Wisconsin. And what happens, all the data got there, this big box, the disk, all the data got there securely in 15 minutes. Well, what happens, that opened the gateway because the other researchers that worked at the old building, they said, great, can we get on this? So we don't have to keep driving back and forth and doing this, wasting all this time. Yeah, sure. Just let me know, and I'll set up a schedule. Just and I'll send it for. Then finally, what happened was Karen came in and she said, the one of the Bobbsey twins is here to give you a message, and she warned me ahead of time, and it was this junior vice says, well, such and such wants to see you. Okay, so I went down and drove down to see him, and he says, you violated my IBM. What do you mean doing this? He sounded like a very angry father as to whose daughter had sex without the father's consent, and it was like. And it's like, okay, John, calm down. You don't know what you're doing. You're a hacker. You're a lone wolf. And I said, John, I'm not a hacker. I'm not a lone wolf. I work with the Navy. I checked with the Navy. I had permission to do this. And also, why wasn't I involved? Because you didn't need to know. What do you mean need to know? John, you realize we're in a war. We're in the first Gulf. We're in the Operation Desert Storm. What does that have to do with it? That has a lot to do with it because all of us have to follow orders and take orders, and also it means working on need to know, and you do not have a need to know. And he says, well, I'm going to complain. He says, fine, okay, John, here's the number. Direct number is area code 202, blah 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 blah. He says, who's that? Oh, well, that's to the Admiral of the Navy upper half. You're working with him? Yeah. Well, okay, and then what happened? I came back, and Karen Troy says, I don't know what you said to John, but he's white as a sheet as well as his associate says. But we're glad you sort of put the IT bullies in their place. And this gets back to Hegemony because at that time, the Hegemony was IBM, the IBM mainframe world and MS-DOS world, and later it moved to the Windows world. Well, finally, what happened was with the Hegemony started in '95 to go to the Penguin of Linux and Arduino. But let's just go on. Just before we go into, let's go into the significance of the Osborne One. The Osborne One, as you can see in this ad, was the first computer that actually came with everything. It came with software, came with two disk drives, and a computer actually you could do work with, because you can see it shows a young woman carrying the Osborne, and it weighed 25 pounds, but it was light enough even for a young woman wearing heels to carry it. Quite advanced, and this was more advanced than what IBM could come up with at the time, and Apple or the folks at Redmond could come up. In addition, it came with a lot of software. WordStar for processing, CBasic for programming, SuperCalc. Let's see, SuperCalc, DBase, and one more. And so what happened was you were able to do word processing, database, spreadsheets, programming. Boy, quite a bit, and all for one flat rate. At that time, $12.50, like that, as it shows in the ad. And the thing is, I had a blue case, and this is the original brown case that's shown in the ad. And it was very sturdy, because when I used to carry this on Wisconsin Avenue, I carried this in a gym bag, carried this up and down Wisconsin Avenue, and I carried it on days like today where the wind chill is 35 below outside, and walking up and down, and I could open it up and still worked and everything else. Now, when we started to move from Z80 machines to 8086 machines, because I will not say DOS machines, because some of us wondered if the DOS people really played fair when the CPM market was sort of vanquished. And that, though, even those of us who were members of the first Osborne group and also were writers for Foghorn, the first Osborne group magazine based in San Francisco, also the first user-supported magazine that became a national publication. Well, so what happened was and it's interesting how the DOS people say, "Oh, you're using Dr. DOS." No, it's not Dr. DOS. It's Digital Research DOS. Oh, well, it says, dear doctor, please read. You remember what that is? Please read. And then they said, well, was this supported by Microsoft? I said, actually, what happens, this is better than Microsoft DOS. Many of us feel it is. And also, it offers better protection. It allows our computers to run faster and use the capabilities that the computers have that are missing from the current version of DOS. When finally, with this allowed us basically to get things done as using Turbo Pascal, and even for me going to Module 2 when I wrote my first ITS program, because with ITS, I needed to have a better language than Fortran that was available on Microsoft, and I also needed a better language than what was available for other things, because Turbo Pascal hadn't been invented yet. So what happens, I started in Module 2, and the Module 2 really flew on a DR-DOS system, Digital Research DOS. So and then when Turbo Pascal came out, that's where I found it is actually portable and able to update it, because in Turbo Pascal, the modules have become units, and that allowed other things. So by about 95, many of us were getting into 486 machines, and at a dinner at the 95 simulation conference, I was with Bruce, and he was executive with the Boeing company in Wayne, and they're both exec. And we were at a dinner, and Mike was there with me, and he worked on a special position and what happened was all of us were there, and the thing is, what happens, we were talking about this new thing, Linux. We heard about this Linus Torvalds, who developed this Linux, and this is why you see the penguin, because the symbol of Linux is the penguin. So what happened was we were talking about this, and Mike says, there's this great new program I've been thinking about is Linux. He says, I think we could really do a lot with it. I said, well, Mike, tell me about it. And then what happens? Some people at the table say, well, how can you expect people to use the program and trust the program with people who can't get up at 9 o'clock in the morning and go to work? Those with people who work at 2 a.m. And I said, well, I'm one of those people who work at 2 a.m. I make international phone business calls to Brussels, London, Berlin. So I'm one of those 2 a.m. people. I said, okay, well, what about this? After the conference, I have a 46 machine. I'll go get Linux and I'll try it out and write a report and write a paper in SC to see how it feels. So what Linux do you want me to try? Mike said, well, here the best one to come out is try Slackware. So I got went back to my life back in western suburbs of Milwaukee. We went to Egghead Software in Brookfield, and we upgraded our system. My dad and I upgraded the system to 16 megabytes of memory, not gigabytes at that time, just megabytes, 16 megabytes. I bought, and you had to buy the Slackware disk, so we bought the Slackware disk. The thing about it was when you first did it, you had to know how to partition your hard drive because they didn't have automatic partition software. So I partitioned the hard drive and I ran it, and what happened, I thought, wow, this is really fast. When I click, it goes, and when I put the clock actually keeps accurate time. It doesn't stop. And you don't see the hourglass all the time. I said, God, this is wonderful. So I wrote a report, and then what happened was I said, no, you guys, we should really think about this because, And one person says, "Oh, Windows 95 is coming out." I said, okay, well, I still made my bet with Linux. And even years later, when I did continuing education to Parkside, there's one professor. I don't know if he was a Windows fan or Super Windows fan or not. He says, Diana, there's some things that that your open source Linux people and the Penguin still can't do. So the Penguin isn't strong to compete against Windows. I said, well, really, you're wrong because actually we have Sample. We can actually read the NFT drives. We actually updated the software that works with all versions of Windows. We actually wrote better word processing software, programming software, and even video software with the Streamlabs desktop that I'm using. And it's like, and then he says, well, show it to me, prove me. And I showed it to him. He says, well, wait. He says, you have a supercomputer here, souped up. No. This computer's just running on 4 gigabytes of memory, and it's a standard mini computer Dell, and it's running and just 4 gig. Well, wait, this is flying faster than my gamer. Linux is faster than sometimes the folks from Redmond, and yes, it is. So what happened was the students looked at this and they said, well, wait a minute. Maybe we should be talking to Diana more. And even in computer science, he said, well, it's good you have the freedom and authority to be able to do this and not to be constrained by associations or basically things that hold people back in hegemonies about considering other ideas and considering other solutions. So when we finally get into it, when we finally get into it, we get into the thing where in the beginning, when basically we started to talk about PCs and move away from mainframes, there was the MS-DOS world, there was the Apple world, and there's the Osborne One world. And the MS-DOS world was based in Redmond. The Osborne world was based on digital research, which is based in around San Francisco. And the DR-DOS was a continuation of digital research. But finally, what happens when we finally do come into to talking about basically the whole thing about what happens though. Um, we come into a thing where basically the two kings that are left are the Arduino, which has gone over like gangbusters. So I'll say Arduino and Raspberry Pi, which has gone over like gangbusters, and um, and the Penguins. Some people thought, well, I remember one time at a 99 Comdex, a few people from the Windows world said, well, we use the Penguin as a punching bag in the office because the Penguin's never going to amount to everything. Well, like in the movie Flight into Penguins, the Penguins are very sturdy birds, and also they're very good underwater birds. So basically, they're not as simple of a species as you think. The penguin is more complex than ever and open source. And the penguin of Linux and Arduino, Raspberry Pi all started from a movement known as open source. And open source is one thing in '95 that broke the hegemony of the mainframe world and the Windows world because people started to say, well, wait, there has to be a better way how to do things. We shouldn't have to always rely on what Redmond's thinking or what's the city in New York where IBM's based is thinking. Um, and even in programming languages at that time, Java came out. And I remember in '99 meeting the inventor of Java, and it's surprising because he actually came up to introduce himself to me, and we talked. He says, I've seen your postings, and you seem to trust the folks from Redmond quite a bit. So, well, not really, but I said I have to rely on the systems to do. But he says, you realize it's a house of cards and some other stuff, and I said, yes, I know that there's still some old code in there and stuff. He says, well, what do you think of Java? I said, actually, I think Java's great. Java is C done right, and many people didn't catch what I meant by that, but he did. What I mean by Java is C done right is, in and the problem that I had when I worked with C is I always used to joke with people I needed a bottle of acetaminophen whenever I worked with the program C because it gave me such terrible migraines. Um, so what I do is basically work with Java. With Java, it's just easy because when you pass the structure is passed by reference. When you have a simple data, it's passed by value. Easy. But now in C, what happens? You have to do this add sign to pass certain things by reference, and then what happens? You have to do this special symbol, bracket, variable name plus offset, and um, working before the invention of the wheel. Oh boy! So that's why I like Java. And to be fair, I have tried C++. I do think it is better um, than the C that I worked with originally and C sharp, but it still has some issues for me because um, I still end up having to chase null pointer arguments way too many times. In Java, I don't have to chase null pointer arguments, nor do I have to chase null pointer arguments in ROD, Delphi LAD, or in Lazarus, and that. So, again, open source, and with Delphi LAD, basically the IDEA community, which is a private sector open source community. Again, kudos to those. Congratulations for getting on the open source paradigm and sort of displacing the other kings. And it's like anyone knows in business, paradigms come and go, businesses come and go. There's a cycle where businesses grow, and then basically they grow, and then eventually they hold, and then they decline. And around here, and we've seen many of us remember that because a friend of mine remembers a mall that used to be called Turnstile, which is just a few blocks, old mall, which is a few blocks west of here. Now it's used by the case plant as a case manufacturing facility. and even like Westgate. Westgate used to be basically Shopko and Randall's County Market. Now has stores, has public storage. So it transitioned from, and in addition, even Regency Mall has transitioned from basically a mega mall of Boston Store, Bergner's, JCPenney, and Sears to basically a community mall. So things come and go. But what happens though, the thing about, like my dad always used to say, no matter what happens, you always have to move on and forward. I mean, some people can say, well, oh, I wish I had the MS DOS days where we had so much power and we were literally gods and such and such. Well, that type of delusional thinking doesn't last, because eventually people say there has to be a better way, and there is, and they move on and forward. But the thing is, what happens though with hegemonic thinking is, when the hegemonic thinkers think that they know everything, and that no one outside the circle knows anything, that's when a new hegemonic paradigm forms, because the people who are outside the circle say, well, wait a minute, we deserve equal input and equal rights in this too. So, just like in software, going back at one time, you can see basically the five major hegemonies, and two currently in place, the Penguin of Linux and Arduino Raspberry Pi, and the three hegemonies that did exist. The thing is, with the computer, when we did change, it wasn't, we didn't have to go nuclear, we didn't have to have a war. It was done by pragmatism, because people said, well, wait a minute, this my computer runs better with Linux than it does with Windows, and I can do better programming that runs on the web as well as on the desktop with Java than I can with the C that was out at that time, and even the C++ that became rather gruesome as far as unwieldiness to use. But it's interesting what Arduino and Raspberry Pi did with C++. They took something which had a bad hegemonic development, and they modified it, and they actually revived C++, that actually now it's respectable. People are willing to try C++ again, because when you do Arduino and Raspberry Pi development, you do use C++. But they made it in such a way that basically they eliminate all these funny symbols and other stuff, and it's a joy. It's a joy to use. So again, by keeping minds open, being pragmatic, and allowing people to try out different ideas without always saying, gotcha, 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 or politicians say, I'm going to call you into a meeting for not thinking properly, not thinking our political party way properly. That doesn't work either. The way you do is people have to try things, people have to experiment, and they can tell for themselves whether something works or not. And that though, because when someone tries to make a bad pie and uses all propaganda, say, oh, this is a great pie, you should try this, and people eat it, go, oh God. That's an example of hegemonic thinking. Now, when someone else makes a pie, and someone offers someone a sample, and you go, oh, this is good. Can I have another? No propaganda. See, and that's where basically in the software world we sort of learned about strict hegemonic thinking doesn't work. You have to be flexible. You have to be open, and you have to do experiments. Find out what actually works. Well, let me know what you think. This has been Ideas with Diana,